I would suggest that we just say a few words about some of the remarkable things you did with USIS as a curator in the framework of USIS. I think that you were responsible for getting a considerable number of the works of African American artists in various areas attention by getting them sent abroad in the various USIS programs.
In fact, the Romeo Breathing exhibition that I sent abroad, that was his first major overseas exhibit.
Yes, and I was involved in that, but you got me entangled in it. And I wrote a brief introduction for the catalog of that and was able to go to at least two of the openings. The opening in South Africa, in Johannesburg, and it was also booked in Durban.
Yes.
So on that trip, I went to South Africa. I went to Durban to give a talk toward the end of the exhibit, and then 2 weeks later, and I was able to stay in South Africa during that whole period. 2 weeks later, it opened in Johannesburg, and I went and did a talk there on bearding. And then, of course, when it opened in India, I was able to go to what was then Bombay, now Mumbai, and do a talk there. And during that period, I did about 8 or 10 other talks in the area. But you certainly were behind that.
Yeah.
Another thing that you were involved in that I was involved in was the dance.
Oh, yes.
Can you tell me about that? That's
You're quite an authority on East Asian dancing.
Yes, but of course it was the African dance that Afro-American dance that we were pushing in that, because based on the PBS film, and to help inform people in Africa of that, I was able to make a trip to Chad and Mali, and did a number of lectures there. But exactly how did you manipulate that?
Well, that was what we call a paper show on African American dance.
Oh, yes.
The history of African American dance. And the museum in Wilberforce was responsible for putting that project together for us. And we showed that all over the world.
Yes, it was just fascinating to have done that. And then sometimes there is a disappointment, and the disappointment has to do with the Bate show.
Oh, yeah. Well, the U.S. Information Agency was canceled out by the government, and we became part of the State Department. And when we became part of the State Department, although we had already paid for the organizing of the Richmond Barthé exhibition to go to Europe, and had printed the catalogs that Smell Lewis had organized the show for us, and printed the posters and everything, and got the schedule together, and spent $100,000 so far on that. They canceled the show when they became part of the State Department, and they began to cut all of their exhibition programs.
Now, while you were in the State Department, of course, because you had to move to the State Department, the whole thing, were you able to get very much going again at any point?
No. They canceled 4 exhibitions at that time that were pretty far along in their planning. And I guess one of the main shows that I had was an American Indian Navajo blanket show. And that was scheduled in Latin America, and they did go ahead with that. But they canceled quite a few projects.
So what were your final activities in the State Department?
Well, I sent more individuals over as speakers and with programs, and with that I was able to send 2 or 3 African American people over, and some women artists. Martha Jackson Jarvis was one of the last people that I was able to send out. And I sent, I can't think of her name, but one of the New York artists that was pretty well known.
Yes, well, of course, there were frustrations, but I think overall you need to be congratulated for the fantastic work you've done, both as a government employee and both as an individual artist, individual curator, and so on. And of course, there really needs to be a record of what you've done since it goes back, to California, some 35 or 40 years ago. So, with my best wishes, and I'm delighted to have this brief conversation with you about it.
Thank you.